Hi, this is Eric. I'm using Haiku Deck and Screencast-O-Matic in order to look at my two articles on the impact of technology on the emotional development. Mine ties in with younger people and teens because that would be my area of interest. The first article would be the psychosocial functions of social media usage in disaster situations. Um, those are the researchers in this study. They're working to determine what is the impact of social media on the emotional state of individuals inside a disaster situation and immediately following it. In this case, there was a stampede at a love parade in Germany in 2012, 2010, something like that. A number of people were died, and this was a disaster on a national scale. As a framework, what the researchers were using were the uses and gratifications approach, which is basically individuals will find what they need in order to fill their needs and desires. So they're looking at what is the role of social media in those findings of needs and desires. So the way they did that is they first did a massive content analysis of feeds. So went through YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and looked to find the different feeds and see what people are using it for. They followed that with a large number of interviews where they interviewed different individuals and looked which social media apps are you using, what are you using it for, and what are you getting out of it. And a large online survey did something very similar. The results that they found was that social media is used for multiple uses. The first, in the informational use, is simply to get information about what's going on. Official channels are sometimes slow, and social media fills that gap. And this is backed up in a number of other studies as well. What these researchers also found, however, is that social media is also beneficial to the emotional states of people. They found that the active use of YouTube and Facebook was beneficial, probably due to an increased feeling of community. In fact, they found the more that users participated in social media, the greater were those psychological benefits. In fact, they even found that those benefits extended to passive users, or not creators of social media, simple consumers, so people watching the videos and following the feeds. They still found that those psychological benefits, probably again due to that sense of community. I appreciated that there was a large sampling. The large content analysis and then large number of interviews in the survey led to a lot of participants, which means it's more likely you're able to generalize from this finding. I like that there were intelligent control variables where they tried to mitigate the moderating variables as much as possible. However, the biggest of the moderating variables, which they themselves identify, is the fact that they're relying on self-reporting. And self-reporting of internal decisions and sometimes unconscious reactions, which opens a door, of course, to improper generalizations by participants. So this, of course, if these type of people tend to think this way, that, of course, could affect your outcome greatly. The authors themselves are unsure about the ability of generalizing, as they say each disaster is different. So the needs of individuals affected by the stampede at the love parade could be significantly different than the requirements of somebody in, say, an earthquake, and therefore it's unsure about how well their findings can be generalized. Other studies, however, have had similar results, so most likely you can generalize to a certain extent. You just need to have a bit of a caveat about it. The study fits into my own research as it deals with how social media regulates emotions. As my area is tying in with teens and technology, the links are pretty evident. Teens go to social media to help them deal with a variety of issues in their own emotional states of their own perceived disasters. While they're rarely to this same level, obviously, as a stampede at the parade, the fact that they're going to social media for their own emotional response is an interesting study. It ties in with my own research. The second study that I was taking a look at, or the second article, is looking at specifically if social media fosters or curtails adolescents' empathy. So this is a longitudinal study. It takes place over a year by Helen Vossen and Patty Valkenburg. So what they are looking for is, we have heard of teens and social media. They're obviously avid consumers. And some people have said that teens' use of social media has caused them to become less empathetic or to have a less sense of their fellow human beings' needs. And so this is a study. It's simply there to determine, is social media use hurting or hindering that development of empathy. It is important to note they have taken empathy and it is divided into two, affective empathy and cognitive empathy. So this would tie in with the idea of I cry at movies or I cry with my friend. That would be affective empathy. And cognitive empathy is obviously more of a brain type of reaction as opposed to that same emotional response. But cognitive empathy should not be confused with sympathy, which is a different type of a thing. The process that they went with, they selected 942 students from a large list of possible households, about 60,000 households, which represents the entire Netherlands. They determined that they made sure they had a 50% gender split, which I appreciate. And the structure of it was they had questionnaires which were 1 year apart. So they asked a questionnaire, it came back a year, same questions. They worked to minimize the moderating variables, such as the gender split, and also by drawing from this large list, they did their best to avoid any socioeconomic problems as well. In this study, they did not really look at mediating variables. They're not looking at why or why empathy levels may rise or decrease due to social media. They're simply looking at if it does. There is also a possible third variable problem. Because the teens are all between the ages of 10 and 14, this is a time in a teen's life where they are undergoing a lot of developmental changes as well. And it could be that teens just develop empathy between the years of 10 and 14, and that might account for some of the findings as well. However, as the study is focusing more on the paralleling directly to the idea of social media use, it's likely that this is not as much of a problem as I may be thinking. The results, what they found was that they found an increase in social media use corresponds with an increase in both affective and cognitive empathy, but not actually in sympathy itself. So this ties in a little bit with my previous statement. Because there's an increase in social media shows an increase in affective and cognitive empathy across the board. That means that likely that third variable is not going to be as much as a problem as I would have thought. They also found that it was heightened in girls. They think that might have something to do with the idea that girls are larger consumers of social media, and therefore the impact of it would be higher on them. However, it could also tie in that girls in general tend to be more empathetic to each other. Moving into my own analysis. I thought this was an excellent study. I really appreciated the large number of teens and how they are working to deal with those variables as much as possible. I like that the socioeconomic status, for example, was minimized, and drawing from such a large pool, they seem to be following a lot of protocols to make sure their information can be generalized as much as possible. I also like that they worked within strict parameters, that what they were working for was simply to find out what is the link between social media use and empathy. Does it raise it or lower it? And did not try to be everything with this one study and try to figure out why it does that. Some of the possibilities that they mention are the idea, well, perhaps something that kids do on social media heightens that sense of empathy. The only thing that they thought possible might be when you are in social media, you are unable to see somebody's face. Therefore, you have to try to determine that from other things, which might heighten your sense of empathy. This fits directly into my own research, of course, as I'm interested in the impact of tech, and especially social media, on teen development, which is exactly what they're looking at with this study. And that is my live annotated bibliography. If you need any more information, check the written part. Thanks.